right. Welcome back to Top 5 Vinyl. Today I'm here with Josh. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well.
Good.
Yeah,
Nice.
thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, of course. Before we get started, everybody make sure to subscribe, like the video, tell your friends, all that cool YouTube stuff, blah, blah, blah. If you're looking to have one of these interviews with me, you can send me an email to top5vinyl@gmail.com. So with that being said, Josh, how long have you been collecting vinyl records?
Oh man, so quite a while. I just turned 40 this year, and I started buying records in the late 90s, probably around 1998.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, so um, my dad had records growing up. My folks separated when I was pretty young, and the collection kind of left the house with him.
mm,
But then I got into I started trying to get into like DJ culture stuff when I was young, about like around when I was like 14 or so.
mhm,
But yeah, it was tough trying to do that because I grew up in Wyoming, so I'm from like a really small town, a place where there's really not much of a culture like that. But it's kind of interesting how I kind of was able to get like a window into that world. In my small town in Wyoming, there was this guy who owned like a little like incense shop
mm,
kind of thing, and I was down in like the kind of like very small kind of Main Street area, and he had like, it was kind of like a gift shop, and he like had incense and stuff, and I heard like house music playing out of the shop, and I was like, this is crazy, like, because like that is like crazy to hear music like that where I'm from.
mm,
So I go in there and start talking to him, and he had just moved, and I don't know the story of why he moved there, but he had just moved to Green River, Wyoming from Detroit. And so I started like bothering him a lot, and I was working. I was young at the time, but I would work like for my mom's bosses. They had like some rental properties, so I'd go like paint like the inside of the rental properties to earn some extra money, and then I would just basically like give him the money. He would send it to like Buy Right Records in
mm.
Detroit, and then they would send like records back to
Wow.
Wyoming. So
Okay.
it's a crazy way to, not crazy, but that's sort of how I really got um into really buying records, because it was still it was like the CD era more, when I started really like collecting music for myself. And but everybody who was DJing was still like using records. So it
Mm,
was before like CDJs and everything happened.
got you. Mm,
So yeah, that's kind of how I got that. And there was an antique mall in one town over, and like the whole basement was just full of records. I wish
mm,
I would. I wish I knew some of what I know now back then.
mm,
Like
mm,
in the like late 90s, early 2000s, I probably could have cleaned up in that
mm.
spot, like the whole basement with full of records. They're
Right,
like 50 cents, you
right,
know.
right, right.
But
And
yeah,
and
that's kind of how I got into it. So however long that is, 20 some years.
okay. And do you remember the first vinyl that you actually bought?
Oh man. I remember a few that I bought from the antique mall, um, that I held onto for a long time. One of them was actually Kraftwerk Radioactivity, and I didn't even know what it was. I just thought it had a cool cover.
Mm,
It was crazy to find that there. And then another record I remember that I got from my friend from Detroit really early on was this like DJ Dion record. It's kind of like a ghetto tech type record from Chicago.
mm,
Um, so those were some of the really early ones that I got. Like, again, just trying to like chase down that like DJ stuff. That was what
right.
I was really interested in. This was like, I mean, I got kind of more into like house music and stuff like that before I got into like hip hop and
Mm,
everything. So,
gotcha.
and then, but yeah, so those were some early ones. Exactly what really
Mm,
the first one, man, I couldn't
can't
tell you off
pinpoint.
my head. It
Okay.
was kind of a while ago.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that being said, and this being top 5 vinyl, Josh, can you show your number 5? What album do you have as your number 5?
All right. So number five, I went with the Jazz is Dead Volume 2,
Mm,
Roy Ayers. Um, it came out in 2020, so it's kind of a newer one in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I picked this record. I mean, there's a lot of Roy Ayers stuff that you could talk about. Like Everybody Loves the Sunshine, or like some of the Ubiquity stuff, or era stuff, or anything. But I picked that record kind of just because of what like the Jazz is Dead stuff kind of means to me, and what Adrian Young is doing with that label and like the concert series or the concerts that they put on and produce and everything. um, so yeah, I found out about Adrian Young probably from the Black Dynamite
Mm.
soundtrack.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember that
Yep,
movie.
I've seen the movie. Fun stuff.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, he did the soundtrack for it, and I remember hearing the soundtrack and seeing that because I like exploitation movies of all kinds, and like I was like, wow, this is really cool. He's kind of doing this throwback to like blaxploitation stuff, and it's like a genre film. And I was like, but the soundtrack is like this amazing. Like I was like, it feels like it's plucked right out of like the '70s,
Mm-hmm.
And then I was living here in Denver and running sound at the time for a job, and he played at the music venue that I was working at, and I remember he brought all these like crazy like vintage analog synths and put on this like super good show. I was like, man, this guy's awesome. So I started following him, and then some years later, yeah, they started. He started the Jazz is Dead series stuff, which I don't know. To me, it's just really cool because they still use in his studios out in LA. They still use all like analog recording equipment and everything, and they kind of bring these artists back that like Roy Ayers. Like he's still. I would say still like a well-known name, but not somebody that you might not think about like him making music now. So
Mm-hmm.
to hear him make like a record that's not a collaboration with like a modern R&B artist, it's like a Roy Ayers record in 2020, and kind of bring that back to everyone, and like hopefully even expose maybe even like a whole new generation to his music. I think is just really cool, and like
Mm-hmm.
everything that Jazz is Dead is does, I just think is awesome. Like great packaging, really good pressings. They sound awesome. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's like yeah, I just really want to talk about like that label and how cool everything that they do is. So that's why I picked
All right,
as
cool.
my five.
All right, so that was your number five. Let's go ahead and take a look at your number four.
All right, so number four, definitely a totally different genre, but I went with John Prine.
Mm.
Uh, his 1971, this is his debut album, self-titled, um, on Atlantic Records. This is the original pressing um, of this record. Uh, yeah, man, this one is just it really reminds me of like my childhood and kind of growing up. It's very folky and kind of country, and like I mentioned, I grew up in Wyoming, so like I grew up listening to a lot of country music growing up. My grandpa listened to a lot of like classic country stuff, and but yeah, that record, I just not only does it's just a lot of the like lyrical themes, like the themes of the lyrics and everything really
Mm.
remind me of home. Um, and then especially the track Angel of Montgomery. I don't know, like it's a pretty like you know I would say probably the most popular song up there, maybe at least one. A lot of bands have covered it, like Bonnie Raitt's covered it.
Mm.
A ton of people have covered it, and I don't know. There's just that song really reminds me a lot of like of my grandma and my
Mm.
grandpa's relationship, and like I don't know. It really every time I hear that song, it makes me really emotional. So that
Mm.
record just has
Yeah.
like a huge like impact on me. Like if I want to remember, if I want to think about my grandma, and there is like with that song, it's like it's a really pretty song. Like it comes in, there's this really nice organ part that gives it this almost kind of gospely kind of feel. And but yeah, like the themes in that song that it's just there's like a certain almost like sadness to it too. Like
Mm.
he's like singing it from the perspective of a woman who's kind of like a housewife in like a rural area, and yeah, kind of just talking about how like she's in this like relationship, and it's not necessarily like abusive or anything, but they're just not really like communicating with each other, and she kind of just wants to like go out and experience things in the world. And I don't know, something about that just really like resonates with me and reminds me of my grandma. So that song just has like a lot of
Mm.
um it just really reminds me of kind of like living in a small town, and that feeling of people there. um I don't know, feeling kind of isolated and like kind of stuck, but then it's
Mm.
also it's also kind of like balanced with being like really uplifting and stuff too. So
Gotcha.
yeah, and I mean the whole record's great. It's like John Prine, he's a veteran, um, but there's some good, like Vietnam protest kind of stuff, and I don't know, he's got this like kind of how do I say, like kind of like common sense of humor, like very folky common sense of humor that just it's like he can make these kind of like political statements without being too I guess like on the nose about it. It's
Mm,
like it's a little bit subversive, and but like it just has this very like he just feels like a common person, like very relatable, I guess,
mm,
like not
gotcha.
preachy, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
a fantastic record. It's crazy he was so young when he was writing those songs, because they seem like they're coming from somebody who's like much older. I think
Mm-hmm.
like in his early 20s when he was writing that
Right.
stuff. And you like think about me at that age, and I was like, I was not that thoughtful when I was like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
22.
I understand. All right, cool. So that was your number four. Let's
hmm
take a look at your number three.
All right, so yeah, for my number three, I went with like um yeah, definitely I would say like at this point is a classic album, Nine Inch Nails, Downward
Mm,
Spiral. I picked this record. Well, I guess first I talk about the record a little bit. So this is a more modern repress of it. Um, it comes with um, nice big full artwork on everything, inner sleeves. You have
mm,
a whole like book of information that it comes with and stuff, which is pretty cool. But yeah, it's like uh, 2017 press of the album from 1994.
mm,
So yeah, I mean but yeah, this album for me definitely, I would say like it pretty much like changed what I was into from like the moment I heard it. So um again, growing up in Wyoming, I was listening to um a lot of like 90s pop country at the time, like Garth Brooks. I had Garth Brooks poster
mm,
on my wall, like
mm, mm,
really into that stuff. My folks separated. My mom started, dating someone a little while after that. And he had a son who was like 16, and showed me like industrial music, and specifically like that album, Nine Inch Nails. And I feel like I went from like in a day listening to like
mm,
country, like pop country music, to listening to just like that. I feel like that was like the moment I started going from just kind of listening to what I was surrounded by, to being like a person who seeks out stuff. You know what I
mm,
mean? So that,
mm,
to me, that's like so many ways what that album represents. And then it's also just been a record that I'll always um come back to. So many of the themes are just things that I resonate with. I mean, there's parts of it that deal with themes of like substance abuse and stuff like that, which are things that I've dealt with in my past, depression, um and all of that kind of stuff. So um there's definitely some kind of cringy lyrics on there. There's definitely some stuff that I wouldn't say like are really aligned with like current,
mm, mm,
you know, things, but I think it does hold like a place in time. I mean, it was a huge, it was a huge record for, Trent Reznor, of course, like has probably still some of the biggest hits that of his career on it. Not that that necessarily matters, but it definitely to me represents like in the arc of Nine Inch Nails, like it, going. It's like you have Pretty Hate Machine, which is almost like a kind of like a synth, almost like a synth pop record, or
mm,
more, and then you go into Broken, which is more um kind of more of like a rock record. Like there is still like a lot of industrial and electronic elements, but it's got it's like more definitely the most like guitar driven Nine Inch Nails project, I would
mm,
say. And then Downward Spiral comes along, and it totally just is like studio wizardry. I mean,
mm,
it's like it's so many textures, it's so deep. I mean, like I remember just hearing like I didn't even really know what like sound design was or
Mm,
anything like that yet, but I was just like the sounds on this record, I was like, what even like
mhm.
how do you even create sounds like that,
Right, right,
And
right.
and I would say it was definitely the catalyst of me getting into electronic music and getting more into um yeah, not just like dance music, but just any type of electronic music, whether it be like ambient or digging back into um like early electronic stuff like Kraftwerk and things like that, or and starting to understand what that
Mm,
um
okay.
music is, and being even just being interested in trying to learn how to make music and stuff like that, because just yeah, hearing that I was just so fascinated. I was I was just
Mm,
like, how do you even um you know make it just it's just like so textured, so deep, like and just really diverse too, because there's like really heavy stuff on it, and then like then you have like really soft quiet piano
mm,
parts, super dynamic. um just a great record, a
mm.
classic. I mean, it's I think it'd be like in a lot of people's
Yeah,
top 20
yeah.
records
All
of
right.
all time. Definitely a like seminal record of the 90s, I think, for sure too, which was the era where I again just started really becoming more of like a music fan for myself. I was like just getting old enough to start kind of like developing my own taste. And I would say that record, Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral, had a huge impact, and still I can still put it on and just be like, yeah, it holds up.
Mm.
Like it really
All
does.
right.
It's
All
like
right, cool. Got it. All right, cool. So that was your number three.
mm-hmm.
Who do we have for number two?
All right. So yeah, number two, I went with Talking Heads,
Mm,
Fear of Music.
okay.
Yeah, 1979. So yeah, I love Talking Heads. I love yeah, just like a lot of people do. Um, but yeah, I mean they're a classic band, classic band. But yeah, I kind of picked that to kind of represent my, my taste in like like post-punk stuff in general. But I also want to talk some about the opening track, Izimbra, because it really is like definitely a great example of like that like mutant disco sound,
Mm,
and also a record that like Larry LeVon would play at Paradise Garage in New York City back in the late 70s and early 80s. So it's kind of like that. Um, it kind of represents like uh yeah, sort of like the more underground, like club culture to dance kind of sound, because it's
mm,
like you have like Studio 54 that everybody knows about, but then you have like Paradise Garage and Larry LeVon and all of that more like kind of underground
mm,
style stuff. And Izimbra was like a big track at that club from what I've read. Obviously, I wasn't there, but
mm, mm,
so I think that is awesome. Plus, you have it's a second collaboration with Brian Eno producing,
mm,
so, and I think it kind of bridges the gap from the, older like kind of art school, um, more like Talking Heads kind of figuring out who they are, then like arcing into that record, Fear of Music, and then going into Revelino, in Light, which is like a lot of people consider their like masterpiece. But I love Fear of Music. I think it's like right now, I would say, I mean, talk to me like a week from now, I might change my mind, but I think it's the best Talking Heads record
mm,
personally. Um, I also like just how like tense it is, and how it's like every song is kind of talking about having like fear and anxiety about stuff, and it's just got this like weird tension,
mm, mm,
it's not
mm,
weird, but it's just like the whole thing is like I don't know, just very like David Byrne, just like at his most neurotic, I
mm,
guess,
mm,
and it's just but it's still super funky. I mean, you have the Talking Heads rhythm section, which is like amazing. They go on to do the Tom Tom Club record, which is like absolute classic too.
mm,
But I think you get that solid foundation of like really of the Talking Heads rhythm section that makes it, especially with Izimbra, it's like you can still put that track on like at a party, and it's gonna like move the
mm,
dance floor,
mm,
and
mm.
it's from 1979, and I feel like it all holds up
Right.
great, it's
All right.
fantastic.
All right, cool. So
Good man.
that was your number two. What do we have for the grand finale?
All
What's your
right.
number one?
Yeah, grand finale again. Yeah, from 1999. Huge, hugely impactful record to me. The
Ha. Okay.
roots, things fall apart.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
um, like I could have done like a whole 5 records of just hip hop records, you know, like
Hmm.
easily, or but to me, I think that like for me, things fall apart just was like I always was interested in hip hop, and then I don't know, when I heard that record, it was like me being a fan of hip hop, even though I couldn't have come from a place that was more like removed from
Hmm.
hip hop culture. I mean, I'm from Green River, Wyoming. South Philly might as well be Mars to me. You know what I mean? But I felt like
Right.
that record just like it just I don't know, Black Thought as an MC, he just like paints a picture, that's like so vivid. I mean, it was just like it was undeniable for me. And that
Hmm.
when I
Hmm.
heard that record, I was like, hip hop is going to be like a part of my life in some way or another because it's just like you can't deny this music
Hmm.
is amazing.
Do you
And
have a favorite song on the album?
oh man, I mean, they're all really good. I mean, I love the track with Mos Def. Um, the name of the track's escaping me right now. Dynamite is super, super good.
I
I
like
mean,
that one.
I don't know. I think another reason why I love that so much is just because I feel like it's so cohesive as an album too. Like I feel like it's a no skip album for sure.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, everything about it is just it just like all flows together so well. I feel like, opening with the table of contents part 1 and 2 at the beginning really like sets the stage. You have that I forget what movie it's from, but you have like that Denzel Washington sample, that sample of Denzel Washington talking at the beginning where it was like, he's like, if you just played what, people like just
Hmm.
like kind of they're almost kind of, I think, I mean, I can't speak for the Roots, of course, but it seems like they're kind of like almost being sort of self-aware of them. Like, because you think about 1999, we're like really shifting out of like a boom bap era into more of like that bling era stuff,
Hmm.
and that more kind of like synthy kind of bass sounds, like Swiss beats type beats that are like super synth heavy, and
Hmm.
kind of moving away from as much. I mean, still in the underground sense, there's tons of jazzy stuff happening, but like I feel like that Soul Aquarians era that record comes from is like really was not becoming like dated, but it was like things had really started to shift from that
Hmm.
into like a
Hmm.
more really polished, not so like that like dusty crate digger kind of like production and stuff.
Hmm.
And so I don't know if it was meant to be like a comment, a kind of tongue-in-cheek comment on that to kind of like start the whole record off like that. And yeah, I mean, just the production, Questlove and crew on that, it just there's parts of it that are so raw and lo-fi, and then you have like, the song with like Erica Badu on it,
Hmm.
like You Got Me, that's like a pretty polished like pop type, not really pop, but like really polished production that's like super clean. And I mean, even that song with it being like a hit, the way that it ends is crazy, where it gets into that like
The
the
snare.
drums, like that
Yeah.
tempo change, and it gets into
Hmm.
the drums like they sound almost like drum and bass, or like IDM kind of like, they get like that really frantic like drum
Hmm.
break comes in.
Hmm.
I mean, and then just the way that that album ends with that Ursula Rucker poem, that
Hmm.
is just like that poem is devastating. I mean, it's like, talking about like it starts with the story of like the father who's kind of abusive, who's not kind of, but like is abusive, and how that affects, the son growing up, leading him into, you know, kind of getting into the streets, falling into addiction. I mean, so many just like heavy lines. And then, in that, Brown Bottles House is Swift Descent. And there's like so many like lines. And I remember I can barely listen to that
Hmm.
poem without like choking up a little bit, because it's just
Hmm.
like, I mean, it's beautiful, but it is just like devastating. But it's like that's what makes it so good.
Right.
And
Right.
I mean, yeah, classic verse by Common on there when he's,
Hmm.
because I forget if like Water for Chocolate came out right after or right before this record, but it's right in that same like Soul Aquarians. You have like Eric
Hmm.
Do Mama's Gone,
Hmm.
D'Angelo, um, Voodoo, Things Fall Apart. I think I said like Water for Chocolate already. And then you have like, you have Jay Dilla on this record. I mean, it's just like a perfect like
Hmm.
group of people with like, Scott Storch is on that record who goes on to play like how many great like on like Dr. Dre beats and like so many classics, I mean that
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
lineup of people on that and like Black Thought just like I mean he's just I mean come on,
Yeah, he's top
Dude,
tier for
yeah, I
sure.
mean he's like yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
I feel like he's always in the conversation of top five of all time,
Hmm. Hmm.
at least for what I what
Yeah,
I.
I would agree.
But yeah,
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your
absolutely.
time.
Yeah,
I really, thank you so much for answering the call when it was put out there.
yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
thank
man.
yeah, thank you for taking the time and for doing this. I mean, it's really cool to be able to, um, talk about music with people, and I hope that people, subscribe to the channel and ultimately like find out about some music that they maybe don't know about, or
Right,
even revisit some classic stuff that they're like, man, I haven't listened to that in a while. I should sit down and listen to it again.
right, right, right.
Yeah. And just to hear like the stories and that connection between humans and music is just, it's a beautiful thing, man. So thank you.
Oh yeah. No problem at all, man. So
Yeah.
we'll talk soon.
Awesome, man. I
All right,
appreciate
man.
it.
Have a good one.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.